These are the pictures the Kremlin doesn't want the world to see. Over 15,000 Russians have been detained for protesting against the war since Putin invaded Ukraine. Over the last 4 months, a series of new laws have passed in Russia seeking to silence dissent. Now, anyone can be jailed for up to 15 years for spreading what the government calls false information about the military. One of those arrested for speaking out was prominent opposition figure Vladimir Kara-Murza.
This regime that is in power in our country today, it's not just corrupt, it's not just kleptocratic, it's not just authoritarian. It is a regime of murderers, and it is important to say it out loud.
Just hours after this interview was broadcast on CNN, Kara-Murza was arrested. His wife Evgenia is the advocacy coordinator of the Free Russia Foundation. Have you spoken to him since he was detained?
My only contact with Vladimir is nowadays through his lawyer. So I haven't spoken to him in almost 3 months.
How are you coping?
Well, it's not easy to be thinking about the fact that he's basically being held by the same people who tried to kill him twice in the past. He has been targeted by the Russian authorities for quite a while now. He was poisoned twice, the first time in 2015. The second poisoning happened in 2017. Both poisonings left him in a coma with a multiple organ failure. So now he's facing a very long prison sentence. And I don't know how that makes me feel. I'm going to continue his work the best I can, and just hoping to bring closer the day when he's released.
There's a long history of Putin's opponents and critics suffering violent deaths. In 2006, former Russian spy turned British agent Alexey Liefenko was killed by radiation poisoning in London.
His friends say he became sick after a meeting with 2 Russian men in a London hotel, one another former KGB officer. They believe he was poisoned on the orders of Vladimir Putin.
That same year, prominent journalist Anna Politkovskaya was gunned down at point-blank range, murdered near the entrance of her apartment building.
We should say no to war. We should say enough for idiocy. We should say Russia and Ukraine without Putin.
Then, in 2015, leading opposition politician Boris Nemtsov was assassinated in Moscow.
A vehicle pulled up and there were a couple of shots fired from it. 4 of those shots penetrated his back.
Why did your husband go back to Moscow? He was living in the US with you and his daughters. He could criticise the regime and say what he liked from afar. Why did he risk his life and risk his freedom to go back to Moscow?
Vladimir has always identified himself as a Russian politician. To him, it is his moral duty to be where people are actually fighting the evil. He believes he would not have the moral right to call on people to continue opposing the regime if he himself were somewhere safe.
So is Putin succeeding in silencing his critics?
I think that Putin is succeeding in showing the entire world how much he's afraid of any kind of dissent. People get arrested for holding peaceful protests with blank sheets of paper. They get detained for switching price tags at supermarket with anti-war messages, for going out in the street with a copy of Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace. So those opinion polls that are offered to the West by the Russian so-called pollsters that show that over 80% of the Russian population support the war and support the regime cannot be trusted.
Vladimir Kara-Murza is not the only politician that's been jailed for daring to speak out against Putin. Alexey Navalny, the man seen as the biggest threat to Russia's president, was arrested last year after he had survived a poisoning attempt on his life.
It was impossible to take notes. It was impossible to record the testimonies of witnesses on a dictaphone.
He's been convicted of fraud and contempt of court. His supporters say those charges are politically motivated.
Together we're a force. It's a time of change. Get out and don't be afraid to stand against this evil.
Navalny has been sentenced to over a decade in jail. He expects to remain imprisoned for as long as Vladimir Putin is in power. Are you able to give us any update on Alexey Navalny and the situation that he is in at the moment?
Alexey was imprisoned and on some sham charges, as well as Vladimir and many other opposition figures in Russia. He's recently been transferred to this high-security prison that is notorious for torture and extrajudicial killing. And just like Vladimir, Alexey continues speaking out, despite all that, despite all the personal risks, because this is what you do if you really want to bring this regime down, if you really want to stand up to it. This is what you do. You just push beyond your fears, the risks to your life and safety, and you go on.
Do you have any optimism that Putin's regime will fall in the short term?
You know what? I have to be an optimist. My husband is in jail in Russia. I have to be an optimist to be able to continue doing this work. I have to be an optimist to be able to look my kids in the eyes and tell them that I will bring their daddy back. If this war ends on Putin's terms, if he is allowed to represent any part of this war as a victory, he will just regroup and attack again. And next time it's going to be Moldova or one of the Baltic states. So this is why I'm sitting here, because I needed to step in and continue Vladimir's very important work. I will not allow the regime to get away with this. I will continue speaking up, and I will do everything possible to bring him back sooner